Morning, everyone. It's great to be here, and thanks a lot to the organizing committee, Dave Kelton and Ray Rainin for inviting me, and Ruth Cudmore, the heart and soul of OABP, for all the coordinating to help with the program. Ray and Dave invited me to come and give the processor's perspective on animal welfare and quality milk. A little bit of a different talk for a National Mastitis Council meeting, but I just wanted to emphasize the need to have the link between quality milk and animal welfare. Really, it's a continuum, and when we talk about quality of milk, we really need to talk about animal welfare as well. So just to give you a bit of an overview, I'm going to talk about Saputo's animal welfare policy, some background and some drivers behind that policy. What is the evolving concept of quality milk, the customer expectations, and what I'll call the new consumer expectations? What are some emerging issues around welfare that get built into that discussion about quality of milk? And also the high importance of animal welfare assurance when we talk about animal care and handling. And I'll talk a little bit about some animal welfare partnerships that our company has been involved with. And Ray's already touched on my background. I'm an OVC grad. I practiced in Navan, Ontario for 18 years. For those that don't know where Navan is, just outside of Ottawa, 20 minutes outside the city, somewhere between Ottawa and Montreal. I was part owner of the clinic for some years. It's a large animal clinic, 80% dairy, 20% equine. Like many practices now, health management focused, repro herd health, ultrasound, some nutrition consulting, and of course udder health and quality milk. A typical Eastern Ontario dairy freestyle with one of my former clinic partners in it, Dave Douglas. And we also did and still do a lot of work in tie stalls as well. I left practice in 2007. I worked for the Canadian Vet Medical Association for 8 years and did work on animal welfare and national issues. The national issues file was a lot of antimicrobial stewardship work. And then I joined Saputo in 2015. So for those that aren't familiar with Saputo, we're a dairy processing company. It was founded by Giuseppe Saputo, who was a master cheesemaker in Italy and immigrated with his family to Montreal in 1950. Wanted to go to New York City, but was ironically denied a visa and ended up in Montreal. So like a lot of new immigrants, they struggled for the first few years, and Giuseppe's son Lino convinced his father that there was an opportunity to make the same traditional Italian cheeses that they made in Italy here in Canada. And Montreal in the late 50s was like a lot of major North American cities. The only dairy products that you could really get were fresh milk, cream, butter, and cheddar cheese. So they saw a huge opportunity there. So in 1954, and using $500 to buy some basic equipment and a bicycle for deliveries, the company was founded, and that's Lino on the company vehicle. The first cheese production facility was built in the 50s, and it was perfect timing. It coincided with a huge increase in popularity with North American consumers for pizza, and so they could fill that need for fresh mozzarella production. We've grown into a multinational company with operations in Canada, the US, Australia, and Argentina. We have more than 12,500 employees, 5,500 in Canada, and around the same number in the US. 53 processing plants, products sold in over 40 countries. We're the largest cheese manufacturer in Canada and among the top 3 in the US and the top 3 in the world. And then with the acquisition of Woolwich Dairy and Montchevre in the US, we're in the goat cheese business as well. So switching over to animal welfare, I was going to talk a little bit about our animal welfare policy. And until recently, Saputo, like many companies, had a very general animal welfare policy. Our company shares industry and society's concerns about animal welfare, and we appreciate that animal welfare standards and practices are required, and we expect our suppliers to adopt proper animal care and handling methods. So I would say quite light and fluffy, and it's kind of typical what you'll see on a lot of corporate social responsibility web pages. And then a game changer happened. It was 4 years ago this month. An undercover video was released from a farm in BC that showed terrible animal abuse. And for those that worked in the dairy industry and worked with cows, it was very difficult to see. Mercy for Animals was the activist group behind the video. They released the video and showed down cows trapped at the entrance to the rotary milking parlor. Cows are beaten, kicked in the face, dragged by chains around the neck, lifted by chains. So totally inappropriate actions. This is a screenshot from the Mercy for Animals website, which is actually still on their website. If you look in the upper left corner, the milk carton that's dripping blood, actually at the time of the incident in 2014, that was a Dairyland milk carton, so a Saputo branded product. So the case caused an immense outcry amongst consumers and the public in general. The times we live in now, not only mainstream media, but social media, this was hugely picked up. And Saputo was singled out by the activists as complicit in the abuse, and it was portrayed that Chilliwack cattle sales is a Saputo farm, and that Saputo has control over on-farm animal welfare on this farm and other farms in Canada. So it really perpetuated a lack of understanding about how the milk supply is marketed in Canada, and that really was done to suit their agenda, and I'll touch on that in a minute. So a change.org petition was started that demands that Saputo stop supporting horrific animal abuse, and it urges people to stop buying Saputo products until it does the right thing. Just a screenshot from the petition. The petition received about 130,000 signatures within just a few days, and Saputo got a flood of calls to our consumer information hotlines. Now, these are people that normally would staff those phones and take calls about product ingredients and recalls, and instead they were getting a massive amount of calls related to this incident. And in some cases, they were actually getting death threats. So animal activist groups, they recognize that the power in their campaigns is targeting major international brands. They realize that they don't get traction by targeting the producer where the incident may have occurred. And I've heard one activist group describe it as it's as if they've discovered gunpowder. So it's these brands that they know that they can target and really get power behind their campaigns. So as a result of this video, Saputo comes under huge pressure from our major customers to not supply them with any products made from milk from this farm. And they were blunt about it. If any Saputo products are coming to us that are made from milk from this farm, we simply won't accept them. And so Saputo was forced to refuse milk from that farm due to loss of market for products made from their milk. And we didn't accept the milk back into our supply until some specific reintegration steps were taken. And one of the most important ones was a third-party veterinary welfare audit conducted to validate that there was producer compliance with the Canadian Dairy Code of Practice. And that third-party audit was critical. It was really necessary to assure our customers and consumers and the public that welfare issues that were identified in the video were being adequately addressed. And to validate going forward, there were no ongoing systemic non-compliance issues that would pose a risk to welfare. So what are those major risks? Well, if you've seen the videos, or any of these videos really, you'll know that animal handling training is huge. Non-ambulatory cow care and euthanasia protocols and training. Those are the big three that you will typically see as issues when you see these types of incidents. So switching over to my role, I was hired in 2015 to develop and implement a policy that demonstrates our our commitment to animal welfare. I think if you look back at the time, Saputo could have ducked their head and waited for the storm to blow over and carried on in business as usual. But they took the position that they wanted to take a leadership role in animal welfare and really...
Sorry, we're just going to give you this other mic as well. So leave that one on, because that's for the video, but we'll get you to use this one as well. Just double mic.
So they took the position that rather than just keep our heads low and wait for the storm to blow over, let's take a leadership position and really show our commitment to animal welfare and advance some of these areas of concern. The animal welfare policy is a global policy. It's meant to be appropriate for all the jurisdictions we have operations, so the North America, Australia, and Argentina. In the development of the policy, we recognize that it needs to be pre-competitive, similar to food safety. We don't brand differentiate or compete on food safety, and we felt that nor should we brand differentiate or compete on animal welfare. The policy is science-based, and it's aligned with the recognized national animal welfare codes and standards in all the jurisdictions we are, and also aligned with the animal care assessment programs that are built from underneath those codes and standards. And I mentioned science, and science certainly tells us what can be done, but consumer ethics and beliefs, they inform us on what should be done. And we balance those two when we develop this policy. So it was released in June 2015. And at the time, we also announced some investment in dairy welfare education and training programs, and I'll talk about those in just a few minutes. So the policy itself has two primary elements. Of course, zero tolerance for any act of animal cruelty and compliance with national codes and standards for animal care. And that would include cattle handling training and an animal care code of conduct. The zero tolerance for abuse element is meant to address situations where there is credible evidence to support an allegation of animal cruelty or neglect. And it's very important that there is credible evidence, and we rely on many authorities to help with that. Animal protection enforcement, milk regulators, and also in North America, there's the Center for Food Integrity that has an animal welfare panel who will help tease out, is this perhaps just an inappropriate animal care handling element that needs training, or do we have blatant abuse? And when we do have credible evidence, we would immediately suspend milk receiving from a farm where there was evidence, and we would continue to suspend milk receiving until some specific reintegration steps have been followed. So I mentioned the reinstatement criteria, and so we won't reintegrate until the steps have been followed. And a primary one is animal protection enforcement investigation usually needs to take place. Although we don't tie our milk suspension protocol to the outcome of the animal protection enforcement investigation. That's a separate thing that needs to go on with protection of evidence and witness interviews that really doesn't have anything to do with the loss of market for the milk. Immediate action needs to be taken to address those involved in the abuse. It could be retraining of employees. It could even be termination of employees if need be. And then an on-farm third-party veterinary audit is conducted, and that's to evaluate compliance with standards and codes and to identify, are there any critical handling or animal care failures that pose an ongoing risk to welfare. The second piece of the policy is compliance with industry codes and standards. and we expect all producers in our supply to comply with those recognized standards. And what are they? Well, I think most know in this room that in Canada we have the National Farm Animal Care Council codes of practice for the care and handling of dairy cattle. In the United States, it's the National Milk Producers Federation, Farmers Assuring Responsible Management, or often known as the FARM program. So we support the establishment of fundamental minimum standards for the dairy industry built from those codes. So some examples of some key standards that we see as minimum are VCPR, vet client-patient relationship, down cow euthanasia protocol and training, pain management protocols, cow fitness for transport protocol, and acceptable animal-based measures for lameness, injury, and body condition score. So just, I mentioned animal handling training, and appropriate animal handling training must include, I think, I just picked out a few elements of the animal handling training piece. Restricted use of electric prods, only used in extreme situations, never in the sensitive area of a cow. And I really think that we need to caution truckers and hoof trimmers about appropriate use. If service providers are coming onto farms and a farm has a policy about electric prod use, that should extend over to the service providers coming onto the farm. Non-ambulatory cow care, we need to establish procedures to care for down cows and compromised cattle. And euthanasia protocols, it needs to include appropriate equipment and training on how to use that equipment. So we support training initiatives and workshops for producers in low stress or quiet cattle handling in partnership with recognized experts. And I think many in the room are familiar with the Cow Signals training program. It's got an excellent stockmanship module. And the Merck Dairy Care 365 modules are computer-based modules that producers can do on-farm training with themselves and with employees. And that's just a shot of the Merck training tools. I just wanted to mention the small ruminant veterinary association in Ontario has run some workshops to train sheep and goat producers on use of captive bolt for euthanasia, and I sat in on one of those workshops run by Jocelyn Jansen and Jeff Rao, and it was amazing. And those producers come in for a day-long session. They learn about appropriate euthanasia methods. They're trained on how to use a Blitz captive bolt tool, and they are trained in the AHL lab on a cadaver head. They go home with a Blitz captive bolt, and everyone has comfort that the next day those producers will be doing euthanasia in an appropriate manner. I just thought it was an excellent program. I just wanted to mention a few specific management practices that we reference in the policy. We seek commitment from suppliers to either eliminate or modify routine practices that are either unnecessary or cause pain. So really what we're talking about is tail docking and pain control for disbudding. Often referred to as the non-negotiables. These are things that we feel need to be either eliminated or modified and incorporated as minimum standards. So tail docking, historically done based on some assumptions that it contributes to cleaner cows and improves the working conditions of those handling milking cows, decreases the risk of mastitis. But it's pretty clear, the science is very clear, there is no difference in udder or leg hygiene or the prevalence of mastitis. And there are definite welfare concerns. It's a painful practice. There's risk of infections. You can get a neuroma or a cluster of nerve cells forming at the amputated stump, which causes chronic pain and loss of ability to control flies, of course. All the Western National Veterinary Associations, Canadian, American, Australian, and the National Mastitis Council all oppose routine tail docking of cattle. And for those looking for the scientific evidence, all bundled up into one package, the Journal of Dairy Science has the tail docking collection, 10 papers that will break it all down. I know when I first graduated, I worked in some freestall barns that looked like this, and shallow, gutters, shallow alleys, inappropriate stalls, bad loops, poor ventilation, low ceiling. So at the time, we thought, this was perhaps an acceptable management tool to get around that. But we now know, working in these barns with excellent stall design, it's an unacceptable practice now. And the national assurance programs and DFC have certainly stepped up with implementing the elimination of tail docking. And here in Ontario, the Dairy Farmers of Ontario has requested that Regulation 761 of the Milk Act be amended. Animal care provisions, including the prohibition of tail docking, are now required and verified as part of a Grade A inspection. So producer wants to continue tail docking, they lose their Grade A inspection. And Saputo submitted a letter of support for the regulatory amendment. Looking at pain control, the use of pain control when dehorning or disbudding cattle and goats must become an industry standard as well. They need to be disbudded using appropriate anesthesia and analgesia. And again, all the national veterinary associations have that position as well. Breeding cattle for the polled gene or no horns is becoming more common, but I think sire selection is still an issue. If you look at the sire catalogs, there are more and more polled bulls becoming available, but there is still concerns around selecting only for polled bulls. Are we giving away some health traits that we've tried so hard to breed into to these breeds? So there are concerns around that. It's estimated it would take more than 20 years to using classic breeding techniques to even get to 50% of the dairy population as polled. But there are new biotechnologies coming. Gene editing using CRISPR technology and other gene editing technologies is really just around the corner. And it's really poised to speed up the availability of polled genetics. And just a shot from Nature and Biotechnology a couple of years ago, and these researchers showed that it is definitely possible to using, this was CRISPR technology, that they could edit out the horned genome. And many of you may have been on the call recently or saw the news piece that Recombinetics and CEMEX have entered into a partnership to develop and hopefully implement this technology into dairy production. Speaking from a processor, we do need to look at this closely, and we need to know that the market will accept these sorts of technologies. If you look at what happened with RBST, where this product was brought to market, and you could argue that they didn't really look to see if there was broad market acceptance for that product. I think we need to look at this through the same lens. So in the last little bit here, I just wanted to touch on quality milk and animal welfare a little bit deeper. And historically, it's simple. Quality milk was always equated to acceptable raw milk standards, starting right at the bulk tank milk grader with organoleptic standards, and then on to lab test results for all of the residue and somatic cell bacteria freezing point. We now know, as we've moved along, that improved cow welfare is also strongly associated with improved milk quality. And I know that there have been some talks done at the NMC in previous years where it's been highlighted that the things we all know now, the proper stall design and bedding improves cleanliness, which decreases somatic cells, and quiet animal handling decreases fear and improves milk letdown and improves milk out or cow milkability. But where are we headed? Animal welfare is now considered a key component of milk quality. And I just thought I'd touch on a couple of the drivers that I'm feeling in my industry to highlight that. So there is the new consumer, or the influence of millennials, and there's rising dairy customer expectations. These are two that I wanted to focus on just for a couple of minutes. So if we look at the new consumer, or millennials, who are they? They were born between 1980 and 1996, so I know that there's some in the room here now. They're often referred to as the social generation. In North America, they make up 1/4 of the population, which is larger than the baby boomer population and 3 times the Gen X population. They're the best educated generation in history. 1/3 have at least a 4-year college degree. And in 2018, in the US at least, most spending power of any generation with more than $200 billion per year. What are some other characteristics? They don't trust advertising. Their buying decisions are made mostly by influence through blogs and social media and other outlets. They demand more than information. They look for corporate authenticity and transparency. And it's not optional, and without that, there is no brand loyalty. And they value animal welfare right alongside food safety. And if we switch over to dairy customer expectations, more and more dairy customers are, the customers are the national brand companies, the restaurant and food service and retailers that we sell our products to. They're requiring all suppliers to meet their corporate sustainability targets, including animal welfare metrics. And many have hired sustainability teams with expertise in animal welfare, and they are very, very well informed on animal welfare and are asking increasingly specific questions. I was at a meeting a few weeks ago with McDonald's USA's corporate sustainability team, and they know a lot about animal welfare, so it's a little bit intimidating being in some of those boardroom meetings with people that are really on the same page on many of these aspects of dairy animal care. So we, as a company, get sent corporate sustainability surveys that we must fill out on a regular basis, and I went back through the last few surveys that I've filled out over the last couple months, and these are exact questions right out of those surveys. What percentage of cows in your supplying herds exhibit moderate to severe lameness? Are your suppliers required to assess and document cull cow fitness for transport? What percentage of your supplying herds regularly disbud calves before 8 weeks of age? List all the euthanasia methods used by your suppliers. Do you prohibit euthanasia by blunt force trauma? So just a little sampling of what the expectations are from dairy customers now. And there are other animal care issues on the horizon as well. When we sit down in these meetings, they ask about other things like cow-calf separation. Where are you as a supplier with that? How about fear-based handling methods, electric crowd gates, and use of prods? Where are you as a supplier with tie stalls and tethering of calves? Hormone use, sync programs, genetic engineering and cloning, and I've just touched on the disbudding piece of that. So what do we need to meet these expectations? And really, animal care assessment programs are what we look to give us that assurance piece. We require robust animal care assessment programs to provide assurance to meet customer and consumer expectations on appropriate care. And to date, we've relied on industry-led assessment programs such as ProAction here in Canada and the Farm Program in the US. And there are questions. Are they providing the assurance piece we need for our customers? And they do get criticism. Are they too lax so that all producers can comply? I just pulled out an example. If you look at the Farm Program version 3.0, the threshold for severe lameness is 5%. You can't have more than 5% of your herd exhibiting severe lameness. When the USDA National Animal Health Monitoring System average for severe lameness in the United States, based on their last survey, is at 2.8%. So are we happy with where that Farm version 3.0 has landed? So processors, we are engaged with industry, both Dairy Farmers of Canada and National Milk in the United States, on the development and revision of animal care programs with the goal that they meet our expectations. We need some of the issues that we've been speaking of looking at pro-action, we need agreement on the major non-compliance elements that are in the program, and I pulled out one here. Euthanasia, I feel strongly as a veterinarian and a veterinarian working for a processing company that euthanasia can't be a demerit. That needs to be a major non-compliance. We can't have producers that continue to validate under the program who don't have a plan for euthanasia, because they could do as long as they don't go over on other demerits as the program stands now. Alignment of consequences for major non-compliance issues, and I highlighted tail docking here. We can't have provincial implementation of this program where in one province if you tail dock you don't get your milk picked up, whereas in another province there's a sliding scale of penalties with no endpoint, no shut-off, just cost of doing business. Animal-based measure assessment, where will we land in Canada on those thresholds for animal-based measures? We still don't really know where those are going to be set, and there's going to be dialogue with stakeholders such as the processors so that we all have agreement around those. And benchmarking of key animal care markers. We need to show continuous improvement, and those markers will provide feedback to education and training programs to help improve those. So if we do know that we can see from the benchmarking that, let's say, euthanasia training is lacking, that feeds back into training programs to get that gap closed. And programs must mature to have a third-party, sorry, that's cut off, a third-party audit component. I just want to mention that veterinarians play a key role as advisors in the delivery of animal care assessment programs. They help producers prepare for assessments, conduct a gap analysis, and follow up on corrective actions that are necessary to maintain compliance. And for example, lameness identification, treatment, and prevention is a huge one. End of life decision making, and in Ontario there's been some huge work done with veterinarians and veterinarians providing knowledge transfer to producers on end-of-life decision-making for cull cow transport and also for euthanasia. And I just wanted to tip my cap to DFO and the work that they've done on their veterinary advisor training program for pro-action. Dr. Barrett and Dr. Roche, who led the program, I sat in on one of these and I thought it was very well done. I'm just going to close out here and talk on some animal welfare partnerships that our company has been involved with. In Canada, it is called the Saputo Dairy Care Program. It's a funding partnership with the University of Guelph through the Ontario Veterinary College, and Todd Duffield's here today, and Todd is certainly instrumental in the development and delivery of this program. It's broken into three elements. Veterinary student learning is the primary element. It's a very unique one-week rotation in fourth-year vet college focused on dairy welfare. It's open to both Canadian and American vet students, and there has been vet students come for this week-long rotation from I think all colleges in Canada as well as some from the US. Provides in-depth learning on some key dairy welfare topics, non-ambulatory cow training, cull cow decision-making, livestock market issues. They go to OLEX in Kitchener-Waterloo to do some boots-on-the-ground training around dairy livestock market issues. And lastly, I wanted to just mention client communication skills. I just think that is so important. It's very easy for veterinarians to have a discussion with producers on raw milk quality and improving somatic cells and bacteria counts. When it crosses over into animal welfare, it's a different conversation, and I love it that there is training around that, because there is a skill set that you need to have an ongoing discussion about the key elements of animal welfare with dairy producers. On the producer and veterinarian education side, there's been veterinary practitioner meetings, which I think many of the vets in the room have been to. They've been focused on cull cow decision making and non-ambulatory cow education. And for producers, there have been producer disbudding and pain control workshops. There's been, I think, more. I've got 5 workshops, but I think there's been more run now, where 10 producers come to a host farm and do a very innovative training session that's both web-based and in person, that is very well run by Charlotte Winder's team. In the US, Saputo is now among a group of funding partners with the University of Wisconsin, the Dairyland Initiative. As many of you know, the Dairyland Initiative provides resources and consulting services and workshops to develop welfare-friendly housing for dairy cattle. Such things as building design for milking and transition cows and young stock, positive pressure tube ventilation workshops, and there's a new module just recently been added called Life Step, which is focused on lameness ID education and training. Our funding has helped provide global access, so anyone can access it now. It's available in English, French, and it's being translated into Spanish right now. So just a few closing thoughts. Dairy customers and consumers have rising expectations that require that animal care be considered a vital component of quality milk. This is a photograph I took from the grocery store that's in my neighborhood where my wife and I shop, and that's the nut beverage case, which seems to be getting bigger and bigger all the time. So, you know, this is some of our competition, and we have to be very cognizant of what we need to do to keep public, customer, and consumer trust in our products to maintain that competitive edge. As part of the value chain, processors recognize the importance of on-farm welfare assurance. It's vital for our customers and consumers. But I really think that industry's attitude to welfare is changing. We are recognizing the need to improve practices in key areas that I've mentioned through the talk that are listed there. And I just wanted to close out. This is a shot of a mission statement from Summit Home, the Loweth family farm not far from here. And I really think they've got it right. You look at number 1, it talks about producing a wholesome and nutritious product that the marketplace demands. And number 2, we will meet the needs of every cow every day. Animal welfare will be of paramount importance. I think that's really well done. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and my email's there if you want to follow up on anything. I'm happy to get back to you. Thank you.